Welcome, gentle listener. Come in, settle yourself where you are. Let the day that you were just inside set itself down beside you, like a heavy coat across the back of a chair. There is nothing more it needs from you tonight. There is nothing more you need from it. Take one slow breath, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now another, a little slower than the first, and one more, slower still. Let the small weight of your shoulders ease, just a little. Let the place where your head meets the pillow or the back of the chair soften. There is no hurry here. There is no place you need to be, except here, with me, with this quiet voice, while the night settles around the both of us, and the world outside your window grows softer by small degrees. Tonight we are going to spend a long, slow night together in a city very far from yours, a city of stone and water, of small clay lamps, of bread baking in the dark before sunrise, a city that you have heard of since you were small, and that you have probably never imagined quite this way. We are going to spend a day in ancient Rome, not the ancient Rome of marble busts and thundering speeches, not the ancient Rome of textbooks, the other one, the ordinary one, the Rome where someone, right now, is feeding small branches into a furnace under a senator's floor, so that the senator's bare feet will be warm when he wakes. The Rome where, far above the streets, a tenant on the 6th floor of an apartment block is listening to the timbers creak and is hoping quietly that the building does not lean any further than it did last week. The Rome where a baker has already scored an X into the top of a round loaf, dividing it, before it bakes, into 8 pre-cut wedges. We are going to walk through that Rome together, slowly, the way you might walk through a museum after closing time. There is no place we have to reach. There is no story that has to end. Only a long, soft accumulation of small, surprising things. The kind of things you might want to tell someone tomorrow, if you remember them. And if you do not remember them, that is also fine, because your only real task tonight is to drift gently away from your own day into a much older one, and then into sleep. So let me start, very gently, in the hour just before the city wakes, when the streets are still nearly empty, and the only people moving are the ones whose work has always belonged to the dark. Picture then a hill, or rather 7 of them, gathered together along a slow brown river in central Italy, and on those hills a city. The city is asleep, mostly. It is the hour before the sun, and the streets between the hills are still narrow, still wet from the cleaning slaves of the night before, and still nearly empty. But not entirely empty. Almost nothing in this city is ever entirely empty, even now. If you stand at one corner, let us say a corner near the Tiber, where the river curves and the wooden bridges still smell faintly of damp pine, you will see, after a moment, a small circle of yellow light moving toward you between the apartment blocks. It is a lantern, carried in a thick fist. The fist belongs to one of the men called the Vigiles. There are 7,000 of these men in Rome, organized into 7 cohorts of 1,000 each, and tonight, as on every night for nearly 100 years, several hundred of them are walking the streets in the dark. They are not soldiers, not quite. They are not police. Not quite. They are, more than anything else, the city's firefighters. The Emperor Augustus founded them after one too many of the wooden tenement blocks went up in flame. The firefighters of today in your time wear different uniforms in different countries, but they all in a sense descend from these men with their lanterns and their buckets. The Vigiles' nickname in their own time was Spartioli, the little bucket fellows. They carried buckets of water, of course, sponges, hand pumps called siphones, long axes called dalabre, grappling hooks, quilted blankets soaked in vinegar to throw on a flame and smother it, and lanterns like the one moving past you now, because most fires in Rome started at night. The Vigiles also kept watch. The Latin word for staying awake, alert in the dark, was vigil, and that word has come, almost unchanged, into the English you are listening to now. When you keep a vigil, religious, political, a long night beside a hospital bed, you are doing what these men did in this city a very long time ago. Their wakefulness is the root of yours. Vigilance, vigilant, vigilante, all of them small linguistic descendants of a tired man with a bucket, a lantern, and a damp street to walk. Let the lantern pass. Let the small circle of yellow move on into the next alley, and the next, and become a smaller and smaller spot of warmth. And let your eye drift upward, up, along the wall of the apartment block on your left. It is tall, taller than you might expect, 5 stories, 6 even. There are buildings in this city that have, in the past, climbed to 9 stories, until the Emperor Augustus, after several of them collapsed onto the people sleeping in them, ordered that no building in Rome could rise higher than 70 Roman feet, a little under 21 of your modern meters. That law is still on the books tonight. Most landlords obey it, some do not. These buildings are called insulae, islands, because each one is in its way a small island of crowded life, surrounded by the narrow streets like channels of water. The wealthy do not live up there. The wealthy live in low, wide, walled houses called domus, with gardens in the middle and slaves at the doors. The insulae are for everyone else, and in an insulae the rule of altitude is reversed from what you might expect. The bottom floor, big and safe, is the most expensive. The top floor, small and flammable, is the cheapest. People with money lived close to the ground. People without money slept just under the timber roof, where the smoke rose first. On the top floor of the insula above you, right now, someone is awake. They are awake because the boards are creaking, because the building is shifting very slightly, the way old wooden buildings shift in damp weather. They are awake because they can smell, faintly, smoke from the bakery on the ground floor. Not enough smoke to be afraid, only enough smoke to know that the day, theirs and the city's, is starting. They are awake because in 3 hours they will need to walk down 5 flights of dark stairs and join the long, slow river of people heading toward the forum, the markets, the workshops, the baths. But for now they are simply listening, listening to the timbers, listening to the rain that fell earlier still dripping somewhere onto the courtyard below, listening perhaps to the soft, regular breathing of the children sleeping beside them, all four of them, in the same small room, down on the ground floor. Under that listener and those children, the bakery is already open. The bakery has been open for hours, in fact, in Pompeii, a city we will not visit tonight, because it has not yet been buried by the volcano that will, in a few decades, freeze its bakeries in Midloaf. There are about 30 bakeries in operation, which is a useful figure to remember. It tells you what the density of bread making was like in any reasonably busy Roman city. Rome, much larger, had hundreds, and in this bakery right now, a baker is bent over a wooden table, dividing a round of pale dough into 8 equal wedges with a sharp tool. Not after baking, before. The Roman loaf, called panis quadratus, the 4-sided bread, in spite of its 8 wedges, was scored before it went into the oven. A cord was sometimes tied around its waist to keep its sides upright. When you tore one apart after baking, it came apart cleanly along those scored lines, like a small wheel breaking into petals. The Romans did not slice bread, they scored it, baked it, and tore it. Pre-cut wedges 2,000 years before sliced bread arrived in your supermarket. Some of these loaves carry stamps on their tops, the bakery's own mark pressed into the dough before baking, a signature in flour. When the volcano finally came to Pompeii, in a year that we now call 79 of the modern calendar, 81 carbonized loaves were left behind in a single oven, the oven of a baker called Modestus, whose name we know because Roman bakers, like Roman plumbers, signed their work. Those loaves are still in museums. You can see on the crusts the dark scoring lines where the dough was cut into 8 2,000 years ago by a baker who never made it home. Below the bakery, below the insula, below the wet street, runs something even older than the bakery, and older than the apartment block above it, and older even than the 7 cohorts of vigils passing in the dark. It is a sewer, a very large one. The Romans call it the Cloaca Maxima, which means simply the Great Drain. It was built sometime in the 6th century before the modern era, more than 600 years before the moment we are standing in now. It is older than the Republic itself. It started life as an open ditch, draining the marshy ground between the hills, and was vaulted over with stone in time, until it became the underground river it is tonight. And here is the small surprise. The Cloaca Maxima is still draining the Forum 2,000 years later, not metaphorically, not in the spirit of, literally. There are tourists in the modern city who walk over a manhole cover in a square that has not changed shape in 25 centuries, and beneath their shoes flows the same water that flowed beneath the sandals of the men who built it. This is perhaps the most ordinary fact about Rome that I can tell you tonight, and also one of the strangest. The most boring infrastructure on the city's plan, its drains, is the part that has lasted longest, not the temples, not the palaces, the sewer, and bringing the water in on the other side of the day's cycle is an equally ordinary, equally remarkable system of pipes. You have heard perhaps of Roman aqueducts. We will speak of them more in a little while, but once the water from the aqueduct arrives in the city, it is divided, dropped into reservoirs, and then sent out, household by household, through pipes made of lead. The Romans called the lead plumum. The artisans who shaped it into pipes were called plumberii. From that word plumum comes the modern English word plumber. Every plumber today, anywhere in the world, carries the same Latin trade name. Every plumber is a plumbarius who has lost the sound of the original Latin but kept the work. Even the chemical symbol for lead on the periodic table, Pb, is a small fossil of the same Roman word, and the pipes themselves were stamped. Each one, a plebarius, would mark his fistula, the Latin for a small pipe, with his own name, sometimes the name of the property's owner, very often the name of the reigning emperor, so that if anything went wrong, anyone who pulled the pipe out of the wall would know whose work it was. Imagine for a moment the modern equivalent. Imagine if every length of copper pipe in your house was stamped with the name of the plumber who made it, and the name of the previous owner, and the name of the head of state. Imagine the paper trail under your floorboards. That was in Rome ordinary. Above your head, the listener on the 6th floor turns onto their side. Below your feet, in the great drain, the water moves on, and the lantern of the vigil has, by now, moved out of sight, into another street, on its way to another quiet corner of a city that does not yet know it is awake. Let us stay at this corner for one more moment before we walk on. The air is the color of ash now, not yet dawn, the kind of gray that comes just before any color returns to the sky. From the bakery's open door, a soft warm yellow falls onto the wet stones outside, and you can see in that yellow the small shapes of the morning's first customers gathering, slaves mostly sent down from the houses higher up the hill, each one carrying a clean folded cloth, each one waiting with a small patience that has nothing to do with the hour, for their household's bread to be ready. Some of them have been standing here for half an hour. None of them complains. The bakery is a place that has its own rhythm, and the rhythm is older than any of them. A slave appears at the doorway with a broad wooden tray. 8 loaves, round, pale, each one already scored into 8 wedges. He hands them out to the waiting customers, 1 or 2 at a time, takes a few small bronze coins in return, and disappears back into the warm. The customers turn for home. Their clothes fold around the warm bread. They walk a little faster on the way back, perhaps because the bread is warm against their forearms, perhaps because they want to be home before their household wakes. A second vigil passes, a different cohort, with a different lantern. He nods at the slaves at the bakery door, who nod back. He continues on his way. The bucket on his belt clinks once. The lantern fades into another alley. The street again is nearly empty, and in the gutter at the side of the street, a small steady film of water is running. It came from an aqueduct outlet at the top of the hill a few minutes ago, and it is on its way by way of the side gutters to a side drain, and from that drain to the great drain, the Cloaca Maxima, and from the Cloaca Maxima to the river. The water has not stopped running all night. It will not stop running all day. It will not stop running for the next 2,000 years. The Romans have built in this city a system that in its essential parts simply does not stop. And so as the city's first lamps dim against the lightening sky, and the bakery smoke begins to curl into the colder air outside the door, we move on gently toward the second hour of the day. The sky has turned by now from indigo to a kind of pale grey, the colour of a pigeon's wing. The lamps in the windows are going out, one by one. The street is no longer empty. There are baskets being lowered from balconies on ropes. There are slaves moving in pairs toward the wells and the public fountains, carrying empty jugs that in an hour will be heavy. Let us follow the water. Not the water in the Cloaca Maxima which is leaving the city. Let us follow the water that is arriving. If you walked in this morning out of Rome through the Porta Maggiore, the great gate, and you kept walking eastward through the fields, past the cypress trees, past the brick tombs along the Appian Way, past the small farms where the morning fires are also being lit, and you kept walking for a day, and then most of another day you would arrive eventually at the foot of a low limestone hill in the country called the Anio. There a long, low channel begins, half buried in the ground. It is paved with stone, lined with waterproof mortar, and covered with a vault. It carries water. It carries that water back to Rome. It does this without any pumps. It does this without any pressure of any kind, except the gentle pressure of gravity. And it does this, and this is the small fact that I would like you to keep with you tonight, over a distance of about 91 kilometres, with an average drop of about 1 metre for every 3 kilometres of channel. Let me say that again, 1 metre per 3 kilometres. The Aqua Marcia, which is the name of this aqueduct, has a slope so gentle that a person walking the length of it would not in any meaningful sense notice that they were walking downhill. They would think the path was level. They would not feel the descent. And yet, kilometre by kilometre, the water is sliding gently down. The hills do not feel it. The river courses it crosses do not feel it. Only at the end, when the water rushes out of its mouth into the reservoirs of the Calian Hill, does anyone really see what has happened. The people who built it were, by your modern standards, working without instruments, without the laser levels, without the GPS. They had what they called the groma, a wooden cross with weighted strings for sighting straight lines. They had the corrobators, a long wooden bench with a small water trough on its top for finding level, and they had hundreds of patient workers walking the route, marking it, digging it, lining it. The result is so subtle that if the channel is too steep, the water arrives too quickly, bursts the seams, and drains the reservoirs by lunchtime. If the channel is too gentle, the water arrives in a trickle. The Marcia is, by the standards of any era, a near-perfect compromise. And there are 11 of them in this city doing the same thing every day, all night, since some of them were finished 400 years ago. The water arrives in the city at high points, the hills, the reservoirs, and from there is dropped into the long network of lead pipes we spoke of earlier. The pipes are stamped, as we said, with the names of their makers, of their owners, of the emperor. They are in their way public records of accountability. If a pipe in a wealthy man's villa is in fact drawing more water than he has paid for, an inspector can cut into the wall, find the stamp and trace the theft back to the plumberius who installed it, the Emperor Frontinus, who at one point in this period was the curator aquarum, the curator of the waters, wrote a long, careful book about exactly this kind of accounting: who paid for what, who stole what, how many quinariae, small standardized pipe widths, went to which bath, which fountain, which house. He treated the city's water like a bookkeeper. The pipes with their stamps were his ledger. And while the water is moving, and the slaves with the jugs are filling them at the public fountains, and the city is starting to murmur into a louder version of itself, let us walk a little. Let us walk down toward the place where, in any Roman city, the day really begins. Let us walk to the Forum. The Forum, of course, is the open square at the center of Rome, ringed with temples and basilicas and shops. It is the heart of the city. It is the place where the lawyers argue, where the senators speak, where the money changers sit at their tables, where the fishmongers and the meat sellers shout, where the prostitutes wait in the corners, where the gossip moves faster than the water in the aqueducts. It is everything at once. Its name, forum, comes from a much simpler Latin word, foris, meaning outdoors or outside. That is all the forum was originally, the outside place. The place that was not anyone's house, the place that belonged to nobody and therefore to everybody. And from that root you have inherited a curious word in your modern English, when a piece of evidence is called forensic, as in forensic science, forensic medicine, the forensic team in a crime drama. The word means very precisely fit for argument in the forum. Forensic in Latin means of the forum. The forensic detective in your television show is etymologically a Roman lawyer making his case in an open-air square in front of a crowd. The DNA evidence is Exhibit 1. The witness statements are Exhibit 2. The whole vocabulary of modern justice still belongs to a paved Roman square that is, even tonight, draining quietly into the Cloaca Maxima below it. And while we are in the Forum, walking toward the basilicas, let me point out something else. Do you see those men walking among the early crowd, in togas of an unusual whiteness, almost glowing white, in fact, in the morning light? The ordinary toga is a dirty cream color, the color of unbleached wool. These togas are different. They have been rubbed with chalk, bright, fine, white chalk. The men wearing them are running for office. They have come to the Forum to greet voters, to be seen, to shake the hands of their neighbors, to look as pure and as luminous as possible against the dust of the city. The Latin word for that chalk-whitened toga was toga candida, candida meaning shining or pure white. From that root comes candidus, and from candidus comes the word that has been used in nearly every English-speaking democracy for the last several hundred years: candidate. Every candidate, every politician in every modern election is etymologically dressed in chalk. They cannot help it. The word brings the chalk with it. From candidus you also get candle, which is the same shining whiteness in a different form, and candid, which is what such a candidate is supposed ideally to be, and incandescent, which is what a filament is when it glows. All of these, every modern candle, every honest answer, every glowing bulb, share a single root with the Roman office seeker dusting himself with chalk in front of the basilica. It is perhaps the gentlest historical irony in the language. Every politician who promises you something is, in the deep grammar of the word, a man rubbed in chalk to look pure. And while we are still in the forum, while the white togas are still moving among the crowd, let me ask you to look up at one of the sundials. There is one on the side of a portico, a flat plate with a sloping rod sticking out from it. The rod's shadow falls on a curve carved into the plate, and there are markings, 12 of them, for the hours of the day. But these hours are not your hours. The Romans divided the day from sunrise to sunset into 12 equal parts. They divided the night from sunset to sunrise into 12 equal parts. The trouble is, in summer the day is much longer than the night, and in winter the day is much shorter. So the 12 daytime hours of a Roman summer were, by your 60-minute clock, about 75 minutes long each, and the 12 daytime hours of a Roman winter were about 45 minutes each. The same hour, the third hour after sunrise, would be a different length depending on the month. The consequence, if you sat with it for a moment, is curious. A Roman afternoon in summer was literally longer by the clock than a Roman afternoon in winter. Time itself stretched and shrank with the season. Shop hours drifted. Appointments were vague. People did not, in any modern sense, run on time. They ran on sun, and when the sun was not visible, at night or in heavy cloud, they used a water clock called a clepsydra, which dripped at a measured rate from one container to another, marking off intervals on a graduated scale. Even the water clocks were calibrated against the seasons, and so as the morning lengthens around you, and the chalk-togaed candidates greet their voters, and the basilica's marble warms slowly under the climbing sun, the city's hidden machinery, the water in the pipes, the time in the shadows, the lawyers in the forum, moves quietly into a higher gear. Let us walk for one more moment among the morning crowd before we follow the bread. Notice the way the money changers have already set out their tables along the south side of the basilica. Each table is a small plain wooden affair with a balance scale, a small wooden box with several compartments, and a thin cushion the money changer sits on. Each box holds coins of different cities, different metals, different ages. There are silver denarii from Rome itself. There are bronze asses, smooth from years of pocket wear. There are old Greek drachmas from the cities of the eastern Mediterranean, brought in by sailors. There are Egyptian tetradrachmas with the heads of long-dead Ptolemies. The money changer weighs each coin against a standard, names a rate, and the deal is done with a brief nod. The Latin word for the small bronze that makes up most of the day's transactions, as, is so old that nobody quite remembers when it was first stamped. The plural is asses, the grandfather of the modern penny. Anne noticed the slaves moving between the candidates, carrying small folding wax tablets and a pointed metal stylus. The candidates dictate, the slaves write. Each slave is in a sense a walking notebook, an external memory that follows the candidate from voter to voter and remembers on the wax every promise made. I told the carpenter I would speak to the aedile about the cracked sewer in his street. The slave writes, I told the wife of the wool merchant I would attend her brother's funeral. The slave writes, by the end of the day the wax tablet will be full. The candidate will go home, eat dinner, hand the tablet to a freedman, and dictate which of these promises will actually be honored. The rest will be smoothed flat. The wax forgets quickly. Memory in Rome is mostly a question of choosing what to keep on the soft surface of a small wooden frame. This, too, is part of the morning's small machinery, not the aqueducts, not the pipes, the wax, the styluses, the endless quiet recording of what was said, and to whom, and in what tone, by men who could not afford to forget any of it. Roman bureaucracy was fundamentally made of wax, and the soft yielding of that wax to a metal point was perhaps the most ordinary sound in the entire forum at this hour, a faint, busy scratching just beneath the louder sound of human voices. Now imagine the smell of bread reaching the street, and the smell of fish, and the smell of olive oil warming in a clay pot somewhere just out of sight, and the day of ordinary Romans eating their ordinary food, beginning at last in earnest. By the middle of the day, the forum is at its loudest. The chalk-togered candidates have given up greeting and have sat down somewhere shaded. The lawyers are still arguing, but with less force. The shops on the side streets have rolled out their wooden shutters and put their goods on display. The cloth, the oils, the small bronze figurines, the leather, the lamps, the cheap clay cups, the sharp iron knives, the pottery jars, and the people moving through those streets are slowing for a moment to think about lunch, which means for most of them they are looking for the nearest thermopolium. The thermopolium, in the simplest possible description, is a Roman fast food counter. It is a small shop opening directly onto the street, with an L-shaped marble counter facing the pavement. Set into the top of that counter, like cup holders set into a modern bar, are several large clay jars, dahlia, each one full of food, stews, lentil soups, wine, hot olives, pieces of pork or duck or fish, kept warm by the residual heat of a small charcoal brazier somewhere in the back. The customer walks up to the counter, points at a jar, hands over a few small bronze coins, and is given a clay bowl with a portion ladled into it. They eat standing at the counter, or carry the bowl back to their workshop, or eat as they walk. This is for most ordinary Romans the only way they ever eat hot food. The reason is simple. Most insulae forbid open fires above the ground floor. The risk of fire, which we have already met in the form of the vigilors and their buckets, is too great. So a family living on the 4th floor of a tenement, who own no fireplace and no oven, cannot cook anything more elaborate than a piece of bread and a cup of cold water. They eat their hot meals at the thermopolium. In the city of Pompeii, which again is still a thriving city tonight, in the time we are walking through, although it will not be for very much longer, there were perhaps 80 of these thermopolia, 80 hot food counters, in a city of perhaps 12,000 people. The ratio, if you think about it, is about the same as the modern density of small cafes in a busy European town. The Roman city ran in this sense exactly the way many modern cities still run. People ate out, because their kitchens, if they had any kitchen at all, were the size of a closet. In one Pompeii thermopolium, excavated only in the year of 2020, The residue inside the dolia was so well preserved that archaeologists were able to identify exactly what had been on the menu the day Vesuvius came. There was duck, there was pork, there were ground fava beans, there were snails, there was a stew of mixed pig, fish, and goat, all together in one jar. The food was, by your standards, more strongly flavored than you might expect. The Romans liked their stews salty, sour, a little fishy, a little sweet. And the reason for that, the reason almost every Roman dish tasted as it did, comes down to a single condiment. That condiment was called garum. Garum was a sauce made of fish, or more precisely, a sauce made of fish and salt, and thyme and sun. The recipe, very roughly, was this. You took small fish, anchovies, mackerel, the cheap leftovers of the fishmonger's day, and you packed them whole into a stone vat. You layered them with sea salt, and then you left the vat in the sun for several months. The fish broke down. The fish proteins fermented into a thick, dark, intensely savory liquid. The liquid was then strained, decanted into amphorae, sealed, and sold across the entire empire. If this sounds on the surface unappealing, please remember that what you are describing is, more or less, the same fermentation process that produces every fish sauce in modern Vietnamese cooking, every bottle of soy sauce on a Japanese table, every dab of Worcestershire sauce on a steak. The chemistry is the same. The Romans were, in this sense, doing what Southeast Asian cooks have done for 2,000 years and more, concentrating glutamates from a protein source by slow microbial action to produce that deep savory flavor we now call umami. Garum was on everything: eggs, bread, fish, meat, salad, wine sometimes. There were several grades of garum, a cheap kind for the slaves, a middle kind for the household, and the most concentrated, called garum sociorum, the partner garum, made from mackerel guts only, which was reserved for the wealthiest tables. A small jar of the best garum in Pompeii cost roughly the same as a liter of perfume, and because the production was frankly smelly, vats of rotting fish in the sun for months, the garum factories were almost always built outside the city walls, downwind. Pompeii had a famous garum producer, a man called Aulus Umbricius Scarus, who built a small fortune on his fish sauce, who put his name on every amphora, and whose mansion was so grand that part of it survives today, with mosaic images of his garum jars on the floor of the entryway. He was, in the most literal sense, a man who had become rich by selling rotted fish to the empire. Now, while you are eating your imagined bowl of stew at this counter, and the heat of the dolium is rising into your face in slow waves, and the garum and bread smell of the street is settling around you, let me tell you one more small thing about the food you are holding. The small bronze coins you use to pay for it are called asses, singular as, and the slightly larger coin, the silver one, is a denarius. A workman in this city earned, on average, between 1 and 2 denarii a day, enough to feed himself, enough sometimes to feed a small family. And from the Latin word for the wages a Roman soldier received, salarium, comes the modern English word that you and I both know well, salary. The word salarium itself comes from sal, the Latin for salt. There is a popular story, repeated in many old dictionaries, that Roman soldiers were once paid in actual salt. That story, when scholars trace it carefully, turns out to be largely a misunderstanding from the 18th century, invented more or less by a Latin lexicographer who guessed at the connection. The truth is more modest. Salarium was probably a small allowance given to soldiers to buy salt and other goods with. It was paid in coin, not in salt. But the linguistic shadow remains. Every modern paycheck, every monthly salary in every language descended from Latin, still carries a faint trace of the Roman idea that money was first a way to buy salt, the only good preservative the ancient world really had. The English idiom "worth your salt," meaning deserving of your wages, keeps the same shadow alive. The story is wrong. The word remembers it anyway. A garum producer of any standing, and especially the man called Aulus Umbricius Scarus in Pompeii, whose name we mentioned a moment ago, would put his own personal label on every amphora that left his factory. The label was painted on in bright red lettering, while the wet clay of the amphora was still drying in the sun. Garum scari, liquamen optimum, best fish sauce, from the workshop of Scarus. It was in the most literal sense a brand, an ancient brand, 2,000 years before any modern logo, and the brand was so trusted that amphorae stamped with Scarus's name have been found by archaeologists in southern France, in Spain, in Britain, and in the wreckage of merchant ships at the bottom of the Mediterranean. His source travelled, his name travelled with it. The man himself, in his great Pompeian villa, had so much money that the entrance hall to his house was paved in mosaic, and the design of that mosaic was 4 small images of the very amphorae he had made his fortune on. The doormat to his home, in other words, was a picture of his own product. There is something endearingly modern about this. The man had branded everything, even his floor. There is in this period a special grade of garum reserved for the wealthiest tables. It is called garum sociorum, partner garum, allies garum, and it is made from mackerel viscera only, fermented for longer, strained more carefully, and decanted into smaller amphorae. A single small jar of garum sociorums in some Pompeian price lists costs roughly the same as a litre of the finest perfume. The Romans in this sense ate the most expensive condiment in the ancient Mediterranean every day and used it on bread. The garum, of course, is not the only flavour in the bowl. There is olive oil, drizzled in just before serving. There is a little pepper, imported, expensive, brought up from India by long sea routes. There is sometimes a thread of honey. There is defrutum, the boiled down grape syrup the Romans used as a sweetener. And there are herbs, fennel seeds, lovage, mint, sometimes mustard, chopped fine and stirred in. The Roman palate was, by your modern standards, a busy palate. Many flavors in one bowl: sweet, sour, salty, fishy, herbal, sharp, all together, all at once. There is a famous Roman cookbook attributed to a man called Apicius that survives to this day, and almost every recipe in it begins with a long list of ingredients of exactly this kind. Take pepper, take lovage, take fennel seed, take garum, take honey, Take vinegar. A Roman dinner was an experiment in layered taste. Notice also the small dishes of olives along the counter, several kinds. Green ones, brined, black ones, oil cured, some stuffed in a way you would still recognize, with bits of soft cheese or with chopped almonds. The olive in this city is so ordinary that no one thinks of it as remarkable, but it is also so essential that no Roman day, from the slave's breakfast to the senator's banquet, ever passes without it. The olive supplies the oil for the lamps, the oil for the body in the bath, the oil for the kitchen, the oil for the rituals at the lararium, and a small handful of fruit at every meal. Without the olive, the city does not work. And notice finally the small clay cup of wine the keeper of the counter has poured for you. Watered. Always watered. A Roman drinking neat wine was by reputation a barbarian or a drunk. The standard ratio was perhaps 2 parts water to 1 part wine for a working day, sometimes 1 to 1 for a dinner, occasionally 3 to 1 if the wine was strong. The wine itself is dark, a little sour, slightly sweetened with honey or boiled down must. It is not, by your modern standards, a particularly delicate wine, but it is what the city drinks every day with every meal in vast and uncomplaining quantities. There is finally a small dish of cheese on the corner of the counter. Hard cheese, sheep's milk, salty, slightly aged, sliced thin. The Romans loved cheese. They ate it at every meal. The shepherds of the hills around the city would bring fresh wheels in once a week, wrapped in cloth, and the cheesemongers would press them, salt them, and age them in cool stone cellars for a few weeks before selling them to the Thermopolia and the markets. A small slice of cheese on the rim of the bowl was the way most ordinary Romans finished their lunch. Let me set down the bowl now. Let me wipe the rim of garum with a tear of bread. Let me thank the keeper of the counter and step back into the street. The crowd has eased a little. The sun is past its highest point, and the city, having fed itself, is beginning to think about its baths. Furrows the budding settling into the streets, and the people drifting slowly in small groups toward the great bath complexes, and the day quieting into its long, indulgent middle. The bath complex, when you reach it, is enormous, larger, in fact, than most of the temples we passed in the Forum, larger than many of the imperial palaces. The Romans built their public baths the way later civilizations built cathedrals, at scale in the center of the city for everyone. The largest bath complex in Rome, the one that will be built by the Emperor Caracalla a little after the time we are walking through, will cover more than 13 hectares and will hold around 1,600 people at once. The baths we are entering tonight are smaller, only a few hundred, but they feel on the inside like a small palace anyway. The entrance is a colonnade of marble. There is a small fee, a few small coins, the same kind you used to buy your lunch. Sometimes the fee is waived altogether when a wealthy citizen has paid for a free day to mark a wedding or a death. Today there is a small fee, but it is so small that even a laborer can afford it. The baths are, in this period, one of the few things in Rome that almost everyone of almost any class attended. slaves and free men, soldiers and farmers, sometimes women in their own hours or their own wing of the building, sometimes everyone, mixed depending on the era and the building's manager. They were, more than the forum, the place the city was its most ordinary self. Let us walk through. First, the apoditerium, the undressing room, a long stone-vaulted hall lined with niches in the walls. Each niche is a place where a bather puts their tunic, their cloak, their belt, their sandals. Sometimes a bath slave watches the niches to make sure nothing is taken. Sometimes the niches are simply trusted. There are, of course, thieves in Rome. There are graffiti complaints scratched into the plaster of these very rooms about cloaks that have been stolen while their owners were inside. "He stole my cloak," one such graffiti says. "May his teeth fall out." You can read it now, 2,000 years later, on the walls of certain ruined baths. Roman frustration, perfectly preserved. Next, the palestra, the exercise yard, open air, a square of fine sand. The bathers, before they bathe, exercise. They wrestle. They throw a small leather ball back and forth. Trigon, the three-corner game. They lift small lead weights. They run a few short laps. The point is not the sport. The point is to warm the body, to bring the blood to the surface of the skin, to begin to sweat. Then oil. The Romans did not have soap. Soap as we know it was a barbarian import, a Gallic curiosity, a thing for washing hair, not bodies. The Romans cleaned themselves with oil. A bather would walk to a small attendant who would pour a thick stream of olive oil into the bather's palms. The bather would rub it into the skin, arms, chest, back, legs. The oil was sometimes scented with herbs, rose, fennel, thyme. The oil softened the skin and lifted away dust and old sweat, and then the bather, glistening, walked into the heated rooms. The first heated room was the tepidarium, the warm room, not hot, just gently warm. The walls were warm, the floor was warm, the air felt against your damp oiled skin like a slow hand placed across your back. The tepidarium had no plunge pool. It was a transitional room, a room to acclimate. Then the caldarium, the hot room, around 55 degrees Celsius, in some baths well above the temperature of any modern hot tub. Domed ceiling, often with a small round skylight in the center, called an oculus, an eye. Steam rose against the curved bricks. The bather sat on a marble bench, sometimes with a wooden footrest, because the floor stones were too hot to step on barefoot, and sweated. The oil and the dust and the sweat and the dirt all mixed together on the surface of the skin in a kind of soft, slow paste. At this point, the strigil came out. The strigil was a curved metal scraper, bronze usually, hooked like the inside of a small sickle with a handle. The bather, or more often a slave, would press the curved blade gently against the bather's skin and draw it slowly along the arm, the leg, the back. The strigil scraped off the oil and the dirt and the dust together, all in a thin, dark film. The bather emerged, after a thorough scraping, cleaner than they had arrived. No water yet, only oil and a hooked blade. Then, and only then, the frigidarium, the cold room, a round chamber with a great cold water plunge pool in the middle. The bather stepped down into water that was unheated. The shock after the heat was the point. The skin tightened, the blood rushed, the body remembered itself. A bather emerged, climbed the steps, was wrapped in a linen towel, and walked slowly out into the courtyard, smelling of olive oil and stone. Now, while the bather we are imagining is still in the caldarium, with the strigil pressing along their forearm, let me tell you about the floor underneath them. It is hollow. The entire floor of the caldarium, and the floor of the tepidarium, and the floor of any heated room in any wealthy Roman house, is raised about 1/2 meter above the ground on stacks of small clay tiles called pilae. The pilae are about the size of bricks, stacked in short pillars, set in regular rows, supporting a thick floor of tile and concrete on top. The space underneath, the space between the pilae, is empty. Hot air flows through it. The hot air comes from a furnace at one end of the building. The furnace is called the prefernium. It is a small low brick mouth set into the wall of an outbuilding behind the bath, where a fire burns continuously, day and night, for the entire bath season. The smoke and the hot air from that fire are drawn under the bath floor by the simple physics of convection. The hot air spreads out under the floor, heats the floor from beneath, then rises up through square clay flues built into the walls and exits at the roof. The walls themselves in this way are also heated. The room is warm not from a fireplace inside it, but from the air pressing in on it from below, from the sides, from everywhere except the roof. The Romans called this whole system the hypocaust. The word means simply burned beneath, underfloor heating in the 1st century of the modern era, 2,000 years before any modern radiant floor. And here is the part of the system the bather almost never sees. The furnace must be fed continuously, from before dawn until after midnight. The wood that feeds it, small branches up to about 3 inches thick, 2 feet long, must be cut, dried, stacked, and pushed in, a few pieces at a time, by a man with a long iron tool. That man is almost always a slave. He sits in a small room behind the bath, in the smoke and the heat, raking ashes, pushing in fresh fuel, scraping out the old. He cannot leave. He cannot be late. If the fire dies, the floor cools. If the floor cools, the bather notices, complains, and the bath manager loses business. And from time to time, when the soot in the wall flues becomes thick enough to choke the draft, this same slave or another like him must crawl into the narrow gap between the floor and the ground, between the pilae, with a long iron scraper, and clean the soot out by hand, by candlelight sometimes, by feel mostly, in a space barely tall enough to lie down in. The senator in the caldarium has no idea. He is sitting on a marble bench. He is being scraped with a strigil. He is thinking, perhaps, about the speech he will give that afternoon. The slave in the gap below him is, at this moment, the entire reason the senator's bare feet are not cold. 2 people are sharing the same building. They will almost certainly never speak. They will never see each other. The Roman bath is, among other things, a small daily lesson in invisible labor, The marble above is the part you remember. The fire tender below is the part you forget. The hypocaust is, more than any other Roman invention, an object lesson in the cost of warmth. The bather emerges. The strigel's last stroke is wiped clean. The cold plunge is taken. The towel is wrapped, and the bather walks out into the courtyard, blinking against the sun, smelling of olive oil and wood smoke. One last small thing before we leave the baths. The Romans had a long-standing belief, much older than the Republic itself, that the right hand was lucky and the left hand was not. When their priests took the auspices, read the future from the flight of birds, a bird seen on the right was a good omen, and a bird on the left was a poor one. The Latin words for left and right, sinister and dexter, took on these meanings so completely that they passed, almost unchanged, into modern English. A sinister plot is, etymologically, a left-handed plot. A dexterous hand is, etymologically, a right hand. The Latin words do not literally mean evil and skillful, they mean left and right. The moral charge was layered on top by augurs in temples like the ones above us, watching birds in the morning sky. When you, much later tonight, hear a phrase like something sinister was happening, you are hearing, very softly, the voice of a Roman priest reading the wrong direction in the morning sky, 2,000 years before you were born. Let us linger one more moment in the courtyard outside the bath, while the bather we have been following finishes their towel and their oil and their slow exit. The courtyard is paved in plain grey flagstones. Around its edges, low benches under a colonnade. On the benches, small groups of bathers are sitting, finishing the last of their afternoon. Some are eating small dried figs from a clay bowl. Some are having their nails trimmed by a slave with a small bronze knife. Some are simply leaning back against a column, half dozing, with their hair still damp. There are wax tablets and styluses on a few of the benches, men dictating letters to their secretaries. Even here, there are a few small dogs wandering between the benches, looking for crumbs, and in one corner a barber is at work. The Roman barber's chair is a low folding stool. The barber's tools, small bronze scissors, a sharp iron razor, a small comb of bone, are laid on a clean cloth on the stone floor beside him. He is shaving a customer with no soap, no water, only the customer's own oiled skin softened by the bath. The razor is sharper than any razor you have ever seen. The barber's hand is steady. A small nick of blood is dabbed away with a corner of the cloth. The customer does not flinch. He has been shaved this way 2 or 3 times a week for 30 years. The barber, when he is done, will be paid 1 or 2 small bronze asses, about the price of a loaf of bread. He will then turn to the next customer and shave him too, and another after that all afternoon, until the light fades. Roman shaving was, like Roman bathing, a public act, performed in public, in the open, in the sight of one's neighbors. Privacy as you understand it now did not, for the Roman city, really exist. The whole city was, in a sense, a single shared room, and so the afternoon turned slowly toward its quieter hours, and the bath complex began, by small degrees, to empty. The bather has gone home. The towel has been left in the changing room. The afternoon is leaning into its long, slow second half. The crowds in the streets are thinner. The light, when you look up, is the color of pale honey. Let us walk now away from the bath, away from the forum, away from the loud part of the city. Let us walk to the edges. Let us walk to the places where the small, anonymous lives of Rome happen. The lives of the donkeys, the lives of the slaves, the lives of the women in workshops, the lives of the carriers and the cleaners, and the lamp fillers and the pipe menders, and the people whose names are never put on any inscription anywhere. And let us start beneath a building. The Colosseum will not be finished for another decade or so when we are walking through the city tonight. But the great amphitheatres of this period, and there are many of them scattered through the empire, from Spain to Syria, already use the same trick. Beneath the floor of the arena, where the gladiators fight and the animals appear from trapdoors, there is a hidden second city. The Romans call it the hypogeum. The word means simply underground, 2 stories tall sometimes, a maze of corridors and cells and lift shafts and ramps and counterweighted ropes. When the Colosseum is finished, and we may as well speak of it, since it is the most famous example, even if it is not yet open in our walk tonight, the hypogeum below it will contain 60 large lifting machines called capstans. Each capstan is 2 stories tall. Each capstan is turned by 4 men on each level, 8 men in total, walking in slow circles around a wooden axle. 40 of these capstans lift cages of animals, leopards, lions, bears, ostriches, straight up through trapdoors into the arena above. 20 of them lift sections of painted scenery, small wooden hills, painted forests, fake rocks, through hinged platforms about 12 feet by 15, and on the outer rim of the arena, 28 smaller platforms, perhaps 3 feet square, are raised by cable and pulley systems that allow a single gladiator or a single beast to appear suddenly at the audience's edge, which means when an audience of 50,000 people in the Colosseum see a leopard appear, suddenly from a trapdoor in the floor, the audience is seeing the work of 8 men they cannot see, walking in slow circles in the dark, 2 stories below, around a wooden capstan, pushing the leopard's cage up through a hidden shaft. For every spectacle, there is at the ratio of roughly 1 to 50, an unseen worker holding it up. The crowd never knows their faces. The crowd never knows their names. The crowd never thinks about them at all. The leopard, to the crowd, simply appears as if from the will of the gods. This pattern, this hidden ratio of unseen labor to visible spectacle, is the truer signature of Roman engineering than any aqueduct. The aqueduct, at least, can be seen from a distance. The hypogeum is, by design, never seen by anyone except the people in it. Let us leave the Colosseum, then, and go somewhere quieter. Let us go back to the bakery we passed before sunrise, and look more carefully. The ovens are still warm. The first wave of bread has long been sold. The second wave is now in the oven, and in the back of the bakery, in a small open courtyard, a donkey is walking in slow circles around a millstone. The millstone is a tall stone shaped like an hourglass, or rather like 2 cones placed point to point, with a hole at the top. Grain, wheat mostly, sometimes barley, sometimes spelt, is poured into the top. The donkey, harnessed to a wooden beam fixed at the top of the stone, walks around and around, turning the upper stone against the lower one, grinding the grain into flour. The flour falls out of a small slit at the bottom and is collected in a wooden trough. The donkey walks like this all day, from sunrise until the second batch of bread is finished, sometimes longer. Sometimes the donkey is blindfolded, so that it does not realize it is walking in a circle and stop. Sometimes it is not. Either way it walks. Its hooves wear small grooves into the stone of the courtyard floor, grooves that, in the bakeries of Pompeii, are still visible today. You can stand in the bakery of Modestus 2,000 years later and see the slow circular path that the bakery's donkey wore into its own pavement, and remember that the bread we ate this morning was, in the most literal sense, ground by an animal. The baker, when the day is over, will sometimes stamp his loaves with his own name. The stamp will be passed down to museums. The donkey's name, of course, was never stamped on anything. Let us walk to one more place before the light leaves us. Let us walk to the back of an insula, to the small dim space where the cleaning slaves of the night before, the ones who washed the streets at 3 in the morning, are sleeping still in the late afternoon on a thin straw mat in a room without windows. They will be woken in a few hours when their work begins again. For now they are quiet. Their breathing is shallow. The wall behind them on the other side is warm, because behind that wall, on the other side of a few bricks, is the praefonium of a small private bath in the domus next door. The slaves on the straw mat are, in a sense, sleeping against the back of someone else's heated floor, accidentally warmed by the same fire that warms the senator they will never meet. The city is full of these accidental warmings, these small unnoticed proximities between rich and poor, master and servant, free and bound. A senator's marble floor is heated by the fire of a slave. A slave on a straw mat is warmed by the back of the senator's furnace. The two never see each other. The fire is the only thing they share. And in another corner of the back of the building, a woman is mending a fishing net by the last light from a small high window. She is the wife, perhaps, of a riverman who works the Tiber. Her fingers move quickly. The light is fading. She finishes the last knot, sets the net down, lights a small olive oil lamp on a shelf, and the light steadies into a soft, narrow yellow pool around her hands. She does not look up. She has no reason to. There is no one watching her. No inscription will be made for her tonight. Her name is almost certainly lost, but the lamp is lit, the net is mended, and tomorrow when her husband goes to the river before dawn, his net will not have a hole in it. The small economies of a city, the ones that never make it into the histories, are running quietly all around us, in workshops, in courtyards, in the back rooms of bakeries, in the dark spaces below arenas. The famous half of Rome, the senators, the emperors, the gladiators, the marble, runs on the labor of the other half. The other half, at this hour, is winding down for the day. They will eat something simple, a piece of bread, a bit of garum, a small cup of wine. They will sleep early because they have to be up early. and because the lamp oil costs money. Let us walk a little further down this same back lane in the soft late light before we stop again. There is in a small open courtyard a coppersmith finishing the final hammered seam on a thin pan. He is bent over an anvil, his back to the street. Each strike of the hammer rings clear in the quiet air. Behind him, on a wooden shelf, the day's work is laid out in a neat row. 3 pans of different sizes, 2 small ladles, a jug, a tray. He has done this all afternoon. His ear is at this point in his life slightly damaged from the long years of hammer strikes. He does not mind. The work is steady. The work is honest. The work is paid. He will sell the pans tomorrow at the market, and the small bronze coins he receives will go, as always, into the wooden box under his bed, with the others, against the day his daughter is old enough to be married. A few doors further on, in another courtyard, a cobbler sits cross-legged on a leather mat with a half-finished sandal across his knee. The leather is pale and stiff from the tannery. The cobbler has cut the strap, punched the eyelets, and is now stitching the sole with a thin twist of waxed thread. The needle moves quickly. The thread is pulled tight. The sandal is shaped gradually into something that will, in a few hours, fit on the foot of a particular customer. A man who came in this morning stood on a sheet of soft clay so the cobbler could mark the shape of his foot, and paid half the price in advance. The other half will be paid tomorrow. The Roman economy, even at this small level, ran on credit, on trust, on the cobbler knowing the customer and the customer knowing the cobbler. There were, of course, written contracts for larger sums, but for a sandal, a handshake was usually enough. Let us pause at one more such workshop before we leave the back streets. In a small open courtyard between 2 insulae, a Philonica is finishing its day. A Philonica is a Roman laundry, a place where cloth, both new and used, is cleaned and softened. The work is done in stone basins set into the floor. The fullers, usually slaves, sometimes free men, stand barefoot in the basins, treading on the cloth the way grape pickers tread on grapes. The liquid in the basin is not water. It is a mixture of water and stale urine. The ammonia in the urine is a strong cleaning agent. The Romans, with characteristic practicality, collected urine from public latrines for this purpose. Some emperors, Vespasian most famously, even taxed the trade. When his son objected to the tax on the grounds of dignity, Vespasian held up a coin and asked whether it smelled. "Pecunia non ole," he said. "Money does not stink." The phrase has come down to us. The trade has not. The fullers tread the cloth, rinse it, beat it, comb it, stretch it on small wicker frames to dry. The shop smells, by your standards, exactly as you would expect. The fullers do not seem to mind. They have done this their whole working lives. Their feet, by old age, are so soft from the daily soaking that some of them are said to have trouble walking on hard stone, and a few doors down from the Philonica there is a small dye works. The dyer is hanging a length of newly dyed cloth over a wooden bar to drip dry. The color is a deep blue-purple, the color of a bruise, the color of Tyrian purple, the most expensive dye in the empire, made from the murex sea snail in such quantities that it took 10,000 snails to dye a single toga. The cloth on the bar is in fact a small piece, only a stripe perhaps, that will be sewn onto a senator's toga to mark his rank. But even a small piece of purpura costs more than the dyer earns in a month. He is in a sense hanging a piece of money on his line. He goes inside. Far across the river, the day was beginning to lean gently toward the long, soft, lamplit hours of the evening, and the city quieting by small degrees into its inner rooms. The light by now is leaving the streets. The shadows have grown long against the brick walls of the insulae, and the color of the air has shifted from honey to something cooler, almost a pale violet, the color of a wood pigeon's throat. Let us go inside. Let us choose for the evening a Roman domus, one of the low-walled houses of the moderately wealthy, not the great mansion of a senator, just the home of a successful merchant perhaps, a wine cellar, a wool dealer, the sort of household that has a few slaves, a small atrium, a small private bath fed by a pipe stamped with a plumberious name, and a cook in the back kitchen. We enter through a narrow corridor. The corridor opens into the atrium, the large central room of the house. The atrium has in its center a square opening in the roof, the compluvium, and below that opening in the floor a corresponding square pool, the impluvium. Rainwater falls through the roof into the pool. The pool, when the rain is heavy, fills and overflows into a cistern below the floor. On a dry evening like this one, the impluvium is still and reflects very faintly the small ceiling of pale violet sky above it. Around the edges of the atrium, the household is settling. The cook is in the back. The slaves are setting the small bronze lamps along the walls, lighting them one by one with a long, thin taper. The lamps are fed with olive oil. They burn with a small, steady yellow-orange flame. They smell very faintly like the kitchen, and in a niche set into one of the walls, a small recess about the size of a modern bookshelf, or sometimes a little smaller, there is a small painted shrine. This is the lararium, the shrine of the Laras, the household gods. The Laras are not the gods of the great public temples. They are not Jupiter, not Venus, not Mars. They are the small, intimate guardian spirits of the household itself. Every Roman house has them, every insula has them, in a kind of reduced form, sometimes painted directly onto a wall when the family cannot afford a proper niche. The Lares are usually represented by two small bronze figures, young men in short tunics, dancing slightly, each holding a drinking horn aloft. Between them often is a smaller figure, a snake sometimes, or a genius, the personification of the head of the household spirit. The head of the household in this house is a man who has just come back from the baths. He is wearing a clean tunic. His hair is still slightly damp. He walks to the larium, takes a small clay pitcher of wine from a shelf nearby, and pours a few careful drops onto the small altar in front of the figures. He scatters a pinch of grain. He says, very quietly, a few words that are not addressed to anyone but the figures themselves. The members of his household, his wife, his 2 children, 3 or 4 of his slaves, stand a little behind him, also quiet. The lamps flicker. The wine soaks darkly into the small altar. This happens every evening. It has happened every evening in this house for as long as any of them can remember. The Lares are, more than the great gods, the gods who are part of the daily life. They are at the door when you leave. They are at the door when you return. They watch the kitchen. They watch the bedroom. They watch over the children when the children sleep. The phrase household gods in your modern English is still in occasional use. It is used now mostly to mean small sentimental keepsakes, the photograph on the mantelpiece, the family Bible, the heirloom that no one actually uses but no one would dream of throwing away. The phrase is older than the keepsakes. It comes with very little change from the Roman idea you are now watching. A small shrine, a small bronze figure, a few drops of wine, a father very quiet, asking a kind of permission to keep his family safe for one more night. The ritual is brief, a few minutes, no more. The pitcher is set back on its shelf. The family disperses. The wife goes to the kitchen to check on the cook. The children are sent to wash their hands before the evening meal. The head of the household sits in a low chair near one of the lamps, opens a wax tablet, a small wooden frame holding a sheet of soft wax, and uses a metal stylus to make a few notes, a list of debts owed to him, perhaps, a reminder to send a slave to the wine merchant tomorrow. The wax softens slightly in the lamp's warmth. The stylus moves easily. In the kitchen, the meal is being prepared. It is not the great formal banquet of the wealthy. It is a simpler dinner. A bowl of lentils stewed with a piece of pork, a plate of olives, a round of panis quadratus, torn into its 8 wedges, a dish of cheese, a jug of wine, watered, because the Romans almost always cut their wine with water. Drinking it neat was to them the mark of a barbarian. There is, of course, a small dish of garum on the table. The garum, by now, has been on every meal of the day. The family does not sit at the table the way you sit at a table. They recline. The Roman dinner posture, in any household with the room for it, is on a low couch, a triclinium set in a U-shape around a low table, 3 couches together. The diners lean on their left elbow, eat with their right hand, and reach toward the food in the middle with the fingers of that right hand. There are no forks. There are spoons sometimes for soup. There are knives, but the right hand is the main instrument. And, small detail, the left hand, the hand the diner is leaning on, is the sinister hand. We met the word in the bath. Here it is again, gently, in the dining room. The diner leans on their unlucky hand and reaches with their lucky one. The Roman world is full of these small, almost invisible commitments to a half-forgotten old idea about left and right. The meal lasts a long time. There is no particular hurry. The lamps are kept burning. The conversation is mild. There are no great political debates here, no public arguments, just the small currents of a household evening. The wife asking after the children's school, the head of the household describing the day's prices in the forum, a slave standing quietly behind the couches, refilling a wine cup when needed. Outside, the city is doing the same thing in 1,000 other houses, on 1,000 other streets, around 1,000 other small painted niches with their little bronze figures. The lamps are lit, the wine is poured, the lerers are paid their few drops. The day is ending, very gently, in the corner of every Roman home. Let us linger in this room a little longer. There is no hurry now. The lamps are warm. The shadows on the painted walls are soft. The slaves have cleared the table, and the family has not yet risen. Notice the painting on the wall behind the head of the household. It is a fresco, wet plaster painted while still damp, a Roman technique that fixes the color into the wall itself. The fresco shows a small garden scene, birds, a low fountain, a few flowering plants. The colors are still bright after 20 years. Some of them, the deep red, the soft yellow ochre, the pale blue, are made from minerals that the Romans imported from across the empire. The deep red, for example, is cinnabar ground from a mercury ore brought up from Spain. It is one of the most expensive pigments available. A small splash of it on this wall represents a year's wages for a tradesman. Roman houses were, in this sense, full of small invisible expenses, the kind that a guest would not notice, the kind the head of the household quietly enjoyed knowing about anyway. Notice also the small mosaic at the doorway to the next room. It is a black and white floor mosaic, made of small chips of stone called tesserae, set into mortar. The mosaic shows a single dog, drawn in profile, with the inscription Cave Canem, beware of the dog. The phrase has come down to us 2,000 years later, almost unchanged in spirit, in any modern language descended from Latin. The dog itself is long gone. The mosaic is still there. Notice the small clay statue of a household genius on the side table, a slim figure of the head of the household himself, idealized, holding a patera, a small libation dish. Romans believed every man had his own genius, a kind of personal guardian spirit that was born with him and would die with him. Every woman had a corresponding spirit called a Juno. The genius and the Juno were honored on birthdays, and on certain days of the year with a small offering. The little statue here is in a sense a portrait of the head of the household's own quiet inner life. It sits beside the wax tablets and the lamp without comment. Notice the small painted scene on the ceiling above the dining room, a circle of plaster painted again as a fresco with a sky and cloud pattern. It is the closest the room gets to having a window onto the heavens. Roman dining rooms were often painted with such ceilings, soft, gentle, dreamlike, designed to hold the diner's eye in the long lying down pauses between courses. The Romans, when they ate slowly. A dinner could last 3 hours, even 4, even 5. Conversations would stretch. Wine would be drunk. Honey cakes would be brought out. A small flute player sometimes would arrive and play softly in a corner. The eye in those long pauses would drift up to the painted clouds. The painted clouds did the work that, in a later century, paintings of saints in cathedrals would do. They gave the eye something gentle to rest on, while the heart slowed down. Notice the small bronze brazier in the corner. It is filled with glowing charcoal, and on its rim is a small clay pot of mulled wine. The wine has been gently warmed, sweetened with honey and spiced with pepper and a little dried fruit. The slave who tends the brazier will in a moment ladle a little into each diner's cup. The wine smells very faintly of cloves, although cloves themselves will not arrive in Rome for a few more decades. Right now it is some other small spice, something more local, doing the work. The head of the household closes his wax tablet and sets it down on a small side table. He stretches. He says something quiet to his wife. She smiles. He picks up his cup of warm wine. The lamp nearest him flickers in a small breath of cold air from the courtyard, then settles. The lamps trembled briefly, then settled again, and the house drew quietly inward toward its long, lamp-lit middle hours. The lamps are lower now. The dishes have been carried away. The wine, what little is left, has gone cold in the bottom of the jug. The head of the household has, by some signal nobody quite remembers giving, decided that the meal is over. The slaves are wiping the table. The children are already in bed. The wife is on a small chair, working a piece of wool with her hands by the steadiest of the lamps. Let us slip outside again. The streets have changed color. Where in the afternoon they were the color of pale stone, they are now the color of old slate. Where in the afternoon they smelled of bread and dust and garum, they now smell only of damp brick and wood smoke. A few windows above us still glow yellow. Most are dark. From the next corner, slowly, comes the small circle of yellow light again. We have seen it before, near the beginning of our walk together. It is the lantern of one of the vigiles, perhaps the same one, perhaps a different cohort. They have been walking these streets in shifts all day, and they will walk them all night again. He passes us in silence. His footsteps are soft. His bucket clinks once, gently, against the buckle of his belt. Then he is gone. Far above him, on the 6th floor of an insula, the same listener we met before sunrise, though we did not see her face then either, and we will not see it now, has long since gone to bed. Her children are sleeping in the same small room. The timber is creaking very gently in the cooling air. There is no rain tonight. The aqueduct outlet at the corner of the street is still dripping, slowly, the same slow drip it has dripped since the morning. The drip has not stopped all day. The drip will not stop tonight. The water has come, as it always comes, from the country, by gravity, down a slope so subtle that nobody can see it. Let us walk down to the river. The Tiber, by night, is a wide, slow, dark surface, almost black. Lights from a few windows on the far bank reflect across it as small smeared shapes of yellow. A skiff, tied at the stone landing, moves very slightly in the current. A cat, sitting on a warm stone above the water, has watched us approach and has decided not to move. Downstream, where the river curves, is the mouth of the Cloaca Maxima. The water from the great drain flows out here into the Tiber, the way it has flowed for 600 years, the way it will flow for 2,000 more. The mouth is a vaulted stone arch. The water beneath it is dark. We cannot see anything in it. We only hear it very softly, joining the river. The forum behind us has emptied. The candidates in their chalk-white togas have gone home, or to the houses of friends, or to the wine shops where they will spend the night drinking with the men they hope will vote for them. The lawyers have gone home to their wives. The shops have rolled their wooden shutters down. The white togas have come off and have been folded by slaves and put into chests for tomorrow. The chalk on the togas, the small fine powder that whitens them, has in some cases transferred onto the arms and the chests of the men who wore them. A wife may be brushing it off her husband's shoulder with a soft cloth at this very moment, somewhere across the city, in a room we will never see. You have chalk on your sleeve again, she may be saying. He may be smiling. The baths are mostly closed. A skeleton crew of slaves is still tending to the Praefurnium in the largest of them, because tomorrow the bath will open at mid-morning and the floor must be hot. The fire tender we met earlier is still feeding small branches into the furnace. He is half asleep. He has been doing this for 16 hours. He will be replaced in another hour by a different fire tender who will sleep in his place, and the fire will continue. The slave on the straw mat behind the bath wall, the one accidentally warmed by the Praefurnium, has woken now and is eating a piece of dry bread by the dim light of a small lamp before going to clean the streets. The streets, in fact, are about to be cleaned. A small group of cleaning slaves moves quietly along the stones with brooms made of bound twigs. They sweep the small piles of debris from the day, the breadcrumbs, the crushed olives, the broken pottery, the scraps of meat the dogs missed, into the gutters at the sides. The water in the gutter, also coming from the aqueducts, will carry the debris down toward the Cloaca Maxima, and from there into the Tiber, and from there to the sea. The cleaning slaves do not say much. They walk in pairs. They are tired. They will be done in a few hours. The city by midnight will be almost silent. Not entirely. There is no city in any era that is ever entirely silent, but almost silent. The vigils still walking, the aqueducts still running, the dogs occasionally barking, the wind in the tile roofs, the river slipping past the landings, the Cloaca Maxima still draining the forum. It is in this hour possible to stand at a corner and hear all of these things at once, layered into each other, and to realize that the city, even at this depth of evening, is still doing the work it began doing at 4 in the morning. The work has not stopped. It will not stop. The vigils will hand off to the next cohort. The fire tender will hand off to the next fire tender. The aqueduct will continue, kilometre by kilometre, drop by drop, the same way it has continued since the day they finished it. The drain will drain. The pipes will hold their pressure. The lamps in the houses will eventually be put out. The lares in their niches will be left in the dark, and you, the listener, are floating gently above all of this. You are not in any of the rooms we have visited. You are not in any of the streets. You are not in the forum. You are not in the bath. You are not in the bakery. You are not in the domus with the family. You are not in the insula on the 6th floor. You are simply here, in your own room, in your own time, with these images settling like dust on a marble bench behind your closing eyes. A single window glows yellow in a sea of dark roofs. Then it too goes out. Then the next one. Then the next. The lantern of the watchman moves into another street, then into another. Then it is gone. Let us stand here for a longer moment before we let the city tilt the rest of the way towards sleep. The river below us is still, almost. There is the small sound of water against the stone landing, very gentle, almost inaudible. The skiff has stopped moving. The cat on the warm stone has settled into a tight loaf with her tail wrapped around her paws. She is asleep, perhaps, or close to it. The Romans believed in some traditions that cats kept watch on behalf of the household, the way the lares kept watch from inside their niche. The cat on the stone, in this sense, is doing the same work the bronze figures are doing, quiet, patient, wakeful, in a way that does not insist on being noticed. Up on the hill behind us, in the direction of the Forum, a single torch burns at the gate of one of the temples. A priest is keeping a small night watch. The torch is fed with a slow drip of olive oil from a small clay reservoir mounted above it. The light is steady. The light has been steady all night. The light will be steady all night again tomorrow night, and the night after, and the night after that. Some Roman temples have torches that have, in their own claims, never gone out for 200 years. The claim is, almost certainly, slightly exaggerated. Slaves attend each torch, replacing the wick, refilling the oil, but the symbol is real, a flame kept always lit in the center of the city. The Vestal Virgins, in their small round temple in the Forum, kept exactly such a flame for the city's whole hearth. It was, in a sense, the slowest fire in Rome. Let the cat sleep. Let the torch keep burning. Let the river continue. Far above us, the same listener we met before sunrise, the woman on the 6th floor of the insula, is dreaming. Her dreams we cannot see. Her dreams, perhaps, are about the day she had, the bread she sent down the stairs to be baked, the water she fetched from the public fountain, the small argument she had with her oldest child about a torn tunic, the small pleasure she took in a cup of warm wine after dinner, the small worry she carried all evening about the rent. None of this is the great history of Rome. None of this will be written down. None of this will be remembered by any later generation as having happened at all. But it is happening. It happened today. It will happen tomorrow. It is the actual texture of the city, beneath the togas and the speeches and the gold. Down at the far end of the bridge, an old woman is sitting on the stone parapet, looking at the water. She has been there, perhaps, for an hour. She is wrapped in a heavy woolen palla, a cloak, and her hair is grey, and she is not particularly busy with anything except watching the river move past. She comes here perhaps every night. She has perhaps a son who works on the river, or a husband long dead who was a riverman, or simply a long memory of the city that is older than most of the people sleeping behind their dark windows. The river does not mind her. The water keeps moving. She watches it. After a while she stands, slowly, draws her pala a little tighter around her shoulders, and walks back into the streets in the direction of her own small room. We do not follow. Some lives are not for following. Some lives are simply allowed to pass. In another insula across the river, a baby has begun to cry. The mother stirs, lifts the baby to her shoulder, walks a slow circle around the small room, hums a quiet, wordless tune. The baby quiets. The mother lays the baby back down. The mother lies back down herself. The lamp in the corner is so low that she cannot quite see her own hand in front of her face. She does not need to see her hand. She knows the room. She knows the bed. She knows where her husband is sleeping. She closes her eyes. The city slowly allows itself to lean closer to sleep. The night has, by now, deepened. The last of the windows is dark. The last of the watchmen has passed. The cleaning has long since stopped. There are only the surfaces left. The people are inside. The lamps are out. The streets are empty in a way they have not been all day. There is no one to look at, no one to follow, no one to listen to. Only the surfaces. Let us simply name them, slowly, one at a time. Let your eye, in the dark, settle on each one for a small breath, then move to the next. There is no story here. There is no fact left to learn. There is only the long, quiet inventory of the things that hold a city up. The stone of the streets, cooling, slowly, the warmth of the day fading from it inch by inch. A hand laid on it now would feel, very faintly, the trace of an afternoon's sun. By the morning it will feel like winter. The water under the streets, still moving. The Cloaca Maxima carrying the small remnants of the day quietly out toward the river. The river carrying them toward the sea. None of this will stop tonight. None of it will stop any night. The lead in the pipes, still, cool, still stamped, every metre, with the names of the men who poured it, still carrying its weight in silence behind plaster walls. The marble in the baths, cooling, the hypocaust below it nearly out, only a few embers in the praefonium, the fire tender now asleep on a wooden bench beside it, the wax in the tablets, cool now, the notes the merchant wrote earlier still pressed faintly into it. They will be smoothed flat in a few days, and other notes pressed in. The oil in the lamps, mostly burned, a few wicks still glowing. None of them will be relit tonight. The bread on the kitchen table, cool, hard now, on the outside, still soft inside. The 8 wedges still pulled apart along their scored lines, the way they were torn at dinner. The lares in their niches, still. The wine on the small altar has soaked in. The grain has settled. The small bronze figures are simply standing there, in the dark, the way they have stood for years. The sundial on the side of the portico, without a shadow, there is no sun for it to read. The bronze of the lampstands, cool, the metal still faintly carrying the warmth of the wicks that burned in them an hour ago. The metal will lose that warmth slowly over the next few hours. By morning, when a slave returns to refill the oil and trim the wicks, the bronze will feel cold against the back of her hand. The terracotta of the rooftops, cool. The tiles still in their long overlapping rows, the same rows they have been in for years, the same rows they will be in for years more. A few small chips of moss here and there on the edges, a few small puddles of rainwater here and there in the troughs. Nothing is moving on the rooftops tonight. The pigeons are asleep in their small cracks. The sparrows are asleep in their small cracks. The cats are asleep mostly on the warmer stones lower down. The earth of the gardens, cool. The small gardens behind the wealthier houses, with their low fountains and their painted walls and their planted herbs, are dark now. The herbs, bay, rosemary, thyme, fennel, are giving off a soft scent into the night air. The small fountain in the center of the garden has not stopped running. The water arrives still from the same aqueduct that arrives at the public fountain on the corner. It runs, it returns to the small basin, it runs again. The iron of the workshop tools, cool. The hammer of the coppersmith is on its wooden bench. The sandal cobbler's needle is set carefully in a small leather sheath. The blacksmith's tongs hang on their hook. The tools will not be touched for several hours. They will be touched again at sunrise. The wool of the cloaks, cool. The heavy palli and togae of the city's people, folded into wooden chests in dark rooms, smelling faintly of wood smoke and cedar. The chests will be opened in a few hours. The cloaks will be put on again. The day will repeat. The pottery of the kitchens, cool. The clay pots that held stew, the clay cups that held wine, the clay lamps with their small wicks, all washed, all stacked, all waiting. The glass of the rare windows, cool. There is glass in this period in some of the wealthier homes, small, thick, slightly green, set into bronze frames. It is rare, it is expensive. The windows that have it are mostly in the bedrooms of the rich. The windows that do not have it are closed, tonight, with thin wooden shutters or with clothes, against the cold. The linen of the beds, cool. The sleepers' linen sheets on their stuffed straw mattresses, holding only the warmth of the sleeper's own body. The linen will hold that warmth all night. By morning, when the sleeper rises, the linen will go cold, the day will repeat. And above all of it, the sky, a few stars between the rooftops, a thin moon low. No clouds tonight. The air is dry and cold and very still. The mortar in the walls, cool. 2,000 years of patience already poured into it. A single brick, set by a single hand whose name we will never know, settling by small unmeasurable degrees into the brick beside it. The wall holds. The wall has held all night. The wall will hold tomorrow. The lead in the curse tablet, hidden behind a tomb on the Appian Way, cool. The bitter wishes of one neighbor against another, scratched into soft lead with a fine point, folded and buried in the earth, asking the gods of the underworld to look unfavorably on a rival. The lead does not care. The lead simply lies in the earth. The bitterness is by now almost too small to remember. The stone of the milestones, every Roman mile along the great roads, marking the long, slow distances out of the city, cool. Mille passuum, 1,000 paces. The Latin phrase, lightly worn, has come to us as the modern mile. The stones are cold tonight. The roads they sit beside are empty. By morning, before the sun is fully up, the first travelers of the day will pass them again. They have been doing this for centuries. They will keep doing this. The brass of the temple bells, cool. The leather of the saddles in the stables, cool. The wheat in the granaries, cool. The wine in the cellars, cool, but in the deeper cellars almost the same temperature as it has been all year. The Romans cellared wine the way we still cellar wine. Some of the amphorae in the back of the cellar are older than the head of the household. Some are older than his grandfather. The wine in them in some cases is too old to drink, but the family does not throw it out. The amphorae are part of the family. They are kept. All of these things, holding their small temperatures, holding their small purposes, holding still. None of them moves. None of them needs to move. The night does not require any movement at all. Let your breath slow now, gently, with the city's breath. Let it match for a moment the slow drip of the aqueduct outlet into the gutter. Let it match the slow current of the Tiber. Let it match the slow patience of the stone. Nothing in this city is asking anything of you. Nothing in this city ever asked anything of you. You are an unseen visitor. You are passing through. The vigils do not know you are here. The bakers do not know you are here. The slaves under the floor do not know you are here. The donkey at the millstone does not know. The senator in his marble bath did not know. The merchant at his lararium did not know. The mother on the 6th floor of the insula did not know. None of them knows. You have walked through their day, and you have seen what they were doing, and you owe them nothing for that. They owe you nothing in return. There is no debt either way. The city carries on without you, the way it carried on without you the day before, and the night before, and the year before. The water still arrives, the drain still drains, the fire is still tended somewhere, the lamps are still lit somewhere, and you, who have been only a listener through all of this, can now begin very gently to draw away, to let the streets soften at the edges, to let the figures in them grow indistinct, to let the colors fade, the honey of the morning, the white of the chalked toga, the deep brown of the bath, the yellow of the lamp, all of them softening now, like watercolors left out in light rain. Let them soften, let them go. The city by now is only an outline, a few rooftops, a long horizon, a faint orange smudge from a single late lamp somewhere far away. Nothing more. You are no longer there at all. You are here, in your own room, in your own warmth. The city has stayed where it has always been, 2,000 years away, and is doing perfectly well without you. Nothing more is asked of the city. Nothing more is asked of you. There is only the small sound of your own breath. There is only the gentle weight of your own body against the bed, or the chair, or wherever you have settled. There is only the slow softening of every small tightness you have been holding without knowing you held it. The lamps in the city are out. The lamps in the room around you are out. The night is wide. The night is patient. The night will keep watch for you. Let the breath continue. Let the room hold its quiet. There is the slow beat of your heart. There is the small rise and fall of your chest. There is the soft sound of nothing in particular, which is in fact the sound a city makes when it is finally allowed to be still. Somewhere across 2,000 years and a continent, the marble of the bath is cooling, the lead in the pipes is cooling, the wax in the tablets is cooling, the bread on the table is cool, the lares stand in their niche, the cat is asleep on its warm stone, the river is moving without any sound at all. None of it asks anything of you, none of it ever did. Let the small final pictures soften, the lantern, the chalk on the toga, the hooked strigil, the donkey's slow circle, the bronze figures with their drinking horns lifted, the 8 wedges of the loaf, the slow drop of water from the aqueduct's mouth, the slow drip of wine onto a small altar, all of them softening now, all of them growing dim, all of them by small degrees leaving the room. There is no city, there is no day, there is only here, there is only here, only the dark, only your breath, only the slow weight of your own warm body settling into rest. Let your shoulders go, let your jaw go, let your hands go, let the day go, let sleep come. There is nothing left to add to the day. There is nothing left to say about the city. The walk is over. And so we leave the city as we found it. Quiet, the streets cool, the lamps mostly out, the water still moving softly under the stones the way it has moved under the stones for 2,000 years and more. The vigil still passing, somewhere we cannot quite see. The aqueduct outlet still dripping at the corner. The Cloaca Maxima still carrying the day, gently out toward the river. The bread still on its table. The lares still in their niches. Every small machinery of the city still doing the small work it has always done. Without needing us, without knowing us, without asking us for anything at all. We walked through it together for a little while. We saw the lantern of the watchman in the dark. We watched the baker score his loaves. We followed the water down its slow, almost invisible slope, kilometre by kilometre, into the city. We sat at the marble counter and ate from a clay bowl. We followed a senator into the bath, and we noticed, behind the bath, the slave with the long iron tool feeding branches into a fire he could not leave. We saw the leopard appear from a trapdoor, and we remembered the 8 men in the dark beneath who put it there. We saw the small bronze figures of the lares accept their few drops of wine. We saw the cleaning slaves move along the gutter with their twig brooms. We will not remember all of it. That is all right. The night is long, and memory is only one part of what tonight is for. The other part is rest. Let whatever stayed with you stay. Let the rest fade. Let the small surprises soften, like wax warming gently near a lamp. The aqueduct slope, the plumber's stamp, the chalk on the candidate's toga, the hooked strigil, the hypocaust below the marble floor, the hidden capstans under the arena, the lares in their niche. Let them all settle wherever they settle. They are old, and they have been settling for a very long time. They are good at it. There is in the end no moral to any of it. The Romans lived because they were alive, and they did the best they could inside the only city they knew. The aqueducts were practical, the strigil was practical. The lararium was a small everyday gesture toward the mystery of being a household. None of it was ever meant for us, and yet the accidents of stone have, over time, made a kind of music, a drain that still drains, a word that still means plumber, a forum that still means forensic, a candidate still, faintly, dressed in chalk. We are listening anyway. Now let your shoulders drop, the way they should have dropped hours ago. Let the small last stiffness in your jaw go. Let your hands rest where they are. Let the breath that has been doing the work of all of this slow down, and slow down again, and become very small, and very steady, and very quiet. The city has gone. The story has gone. Only this room remains. Only this breath. Only the soft weight of your own body against the bed. Close your eyes, if they are not closed already. Let the last picture fade. Let the lamp settle. Let the night hold you. There is nothing more. Nothing pulls you forward. Nothing waits. Let your thoughts drift like petals on slow water. Let your breath slow. Let the dark be warm. Let sleep find you. Sleep well. Sweet dreams.